Hello everybody, Elias here again. I wanted to talk a little today about, well, for many years, I had a misunderstanding about a terrible misunderstanding about God, about His Word, about His commands, and especially about His love. Now, we all know that God is love. But I think we all need to be reminded that God's love is actually unconditional. If we are under law, we're going to shy away from that word unconditional because we think it leads to reckless living and disregard for the commandments of Christ and license to sin or whatever, and it's just not true. It actually, the love of God enables us to obey. But first we have to establish in our hearts, does He love us unconditionally? Let's fight. There's a lot of verses. I know some of you are going to be looking at a lot of verses that appear to be conditional. But you have to look deeper. I just picked out a few. And the rest of you are going to have to do your own study and come to this. I'm just sharing what I found. And this is just a few verses. Of course, the first one, John 3:16, everyone knows it. God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son. Right? That whosoever should believe in Him would not perish but receive everlasting life. Everybody knows that verse. Right? Then I put that with Romans chapter 5, verse 8. But God commendeth His love toward us, in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. So you put Romans chapter 5, verse 8 with John 3:16, and it's showing how, that's a first example of how God loved us first. While we were yet sinners, He came along and did this. He showed His love toward us. Doesn't that sound like He loved you first, folks? John chapter 14, verse 15. We've all read it, and these are one of those verses that if you just read alone without looking deeply into it, you're going to think His love is conditional. John chapter 14, verse 15. If you love Me, keep My commandments. Right? If you love Me, keep My commandments. So this is where I was stuck. I always saw the if. If, the biggest two-letter word in the English language. And I always saw that as a condition. I always saw His salvation, His love, His grace as conditional. And it was messing me up, folks. Because if you always think everything about God is conditional, you can never quite meet that condition. And you always feel like you're failing and coming short of that condition. Then there's always another condition you didn't meet, even if you thought, well, okay, I met this condition, that condition. Oh, but you forgot about this and this, and before you know it, you're in bondage to the law. Without even realizing it, thinking that you know all about grace, when really you just bound yourself under law. You know, the adversary's tricky with that law, folks. He's going to sneak it in. In many ways, he tries to sneak it in. You know? But, not to get off the subject here, I was looking at John chapter 13, verse 34-35. We just read, if you love Me, keep My commandments. Okay, so what are His commandments? John chapter 13, verse 34 and 35, a new commandment I give you, that you love one another as I have loved you. Whoops, there we go. He wants them to love one another as he has loved them. So he's putting his love for them first. That you also love one another. It should be a natural result, folks. We don't love him so that he will love us. We love him because he has loved us. It's a natural result. So naturally, John chapter 14, verse 15, is not saying anything different. It's just saying, if you keep my commandment, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. It will be a natural result. What else are you going to do if you love him? If you love him, that's what you're going to do. That's all he's saying there. He's not trying to lay a condition so that he might love you. And if you love him because he loved you first, then a natural result will be that the Father and the Son will love you back even more. Love just begets more love. Remember when Christ said, to whom much is forgiven, the same loves much? But that's all of us, folks. It's supposed to be all of us. We were forgiven much. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. We were forgiven much. And if we believe that, then we will also love much. For he loved us first. All I'm saying here, folks, is everything is a result of what he has done and what he is all about. And God is, what is God all about? God is love. Right? And then now John chapter 14 verse 23, he that doesn't love me doesn't keep my sayings. Again, he that doesn't love Christ doesn't keep his sayings as a natural result. And the word which you hear is not mine, but the Father which sent me. So he's saying if somebody doesn't love him, they won't keep his sayings. And the word that they heard wasn't only his, but the Father's also. So it's like they're in not loving Christ, they're not keeping his sayings, they're rejecting Christ and the Father. So that's serious business there, folks. And why would somebody not love him? Right? Because they don't believe him, they don't receive his love. Did the Pharisees receive his love? No. Everybody knows that. The Pharisees did not receive his love, folks. They did not believe him. They did not believe. Right? They believed in the law. Okay, they wanted the law. That's what they wanted. And the law was very conditional. Talk about conditional love right there. There it is, right there, the law. That was all about do this or else. There's a condition. Do this and live. Don't do this, you're going to get whacked. Whatever happened to Israel, to ancient Israel, when the king was sinning left and right and he was putting up idols and even near the temple and worshipping other gods, the gods of the nations around them? Did it ever go well with them? Oh, does that mean so? Well, Elias, are you trying to say, if we do that now, that God will just simply love us? No, I'm saying we won't do that now because we naturally love him as a result of him loving us first. That's what I'm saying. So of course we're not going to be worshiping idols. So let's not get silly, folks. Let's get serious. He who loves knows that he is loved. He that does not love does not yet have the love of God perfected in him. Right? Don't we want the love of God perfected in us? First of all, we have to receive that love. We have to believe the gospel. We have to receive grace, and you can't separate grace from love, folks. There's just no way. I used to do that in the past, and now I realize the folly in that. You cannot separate God is love and the grace of Christ. The two phrases, love and grace, where God is concerned, you cannot separate it. Any more than you could separate law and sin. But anyway, I was also... So we see that John chapter 14 verse 23, like I said, he that doesn't love me does not keep my sayings. Right? And do we see any result of this? Do we see this happening anywhere? How about 2 Corinthians 12:15? Paul said something here. Now I will very gladly spend and be spent for you, though the more abundantly I love you, the less I be loved. So Paul was saying he was abundantly loving them, and the more he did that, the more he loved them on them, the less he was loved. Isn't that the same what happened with Christ and the Pharisees? The more he loved, the more he showed the love of God, the less they loved him. The more their hearts became hardened. See, that just shows there, hey, if you're not receiving the love of God, you're not going to return it. You didn't receive it. For whatever reason, you had that unbelief. Well, actually, there is a reason. There's a veil over your heart whenever the law is read. And that goes to the unbeliever too. Oh, but what are you talking about? I don't know nothing about the law. Sure you do. There's a law in your conscience. There's a thou shalt not in your conscience. And whenever you hear that thou shalt not, your heart is veiled towards God and you're not receiving His love. So, unbelief is unbelief, folks. Whether it's the non-Christian who's unbelieving or the Christian who's unbelieving. Unbelief is unbelief. And the love of God is not perfected in them. And anyway, that my experiences in the past, I had to go through a lot of torment because of my terrible misunderstandings of God's intentions, His motives, His love. Thinking all the time that it was conditional, and I always felt like a failure. I always felt like I can never really meet that condition. You know how discouraging that is, folks? To always think you're never good enough. You never meet the criteria. Now you apply that to trying to walk with God and trying to be a Christian and feeling like that. But it's all a lie, folks. It's not true. His love is unconditional. It has to be, or it can't work. It can't work any other way. Did it work with Israel, with ancient Israel? That conditional love, did it work? No. Nope. God Himself desired to throw out that old covenant and replace it with a better covenant. Right? The law was for another purpose. It wasn't really to show that conditional love works. It doesn't. It was to show that unconditional love works. The law was to show that Christ works, that His righteousness is what works in us. And that's why we needed the law. That's why they needed the law, to show us how futile it was without Christ. And if we insist on sticking around in that law, we will get the same lesson. And folks, I ran out of time. May the Lord keep and bless you. We'll talk some other time.